It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 628 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Joining me on the show today is my guest, Damian Thompson, who's the Chief Customer Officer of LeadFuze. And our conversation today is all about selling as a service, how you as a salesperson need to serve your buyer first in order to sell to your buyer, give to get. So we're going to dive into how having the service perspective really helps sales reps who are having a hard time qualifying and closing business with the right prospects. And we'll get into how really it's our outdated views of a seller's responsibilities are perpetuated by much of the sales training that's provided today and how we can change that. So be sure to join us for this. If you'd like to see the show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/628. So friends, as I've been mentioning, I've been mentoring and training sales professionals for years now, and I can tell you that one of the most important elements to career success is aligning yourself with a company that develops its employees, values their customers, and has a portfolio of products that really can compete with anyone in the market. And with its recent acquisition of Level 3, the new CenturyLink has become a world leader in providing cloud security, real-time communications, hybrid IT, and managed services. So if you're a top sales producer and you're looking to challenge yourself in order to take your career to the next level, then visit CenturyLink.com/accelerate. That's CenturyLink.com/accelerate and join their talent community and see if perhaps CenturyLink would be the right step for you and your career. Lastly, before I talk with Damian, let me remind you, as I do in every episode, that if you haven't yet signed up to receive my periodic emails, then you're missing out. I do save some of my best writing about sales, best advice and recommendations, but sales, leadership, resilience, character, values that can help drive your sales results. Save those for my subscribers. So visit andypaul.com right now to subscribe to that. All right, let's get to it. Damian Thompson, welcome to Accelerate.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona, by the time I got to Phoenix. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, Glenn Campbell just died recently. Always think of Phoenix when I think of Glenn Campbell. So, question for you. We've got sort of standard opening question I ask during I change it around often, but here's today's standard question. And that is, in your opinion, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today? With everything going on in the world, all the technological change, what's their biggest challenge?
Well, that's a great question, actually.
So I make the big bucks doing that.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm being bombarded with a bunch of them. So I think, I talk about kind of the biggest challenge I think that salespeople have is something that the sales profession as a whole kind of has, and it's one of those problems that it's going to be a little esoteric, but I think we have an identity problem, and I think most salespeople have an identity problem. And I'm a sales professional. I love my profession. I treat this as a profession. I educate myself outside of work hours. I read everything I can. I'm always looking to discuss what works and what doesn't work, and test and measure. And I'm a big fan. I do believe it's the pointy end of the stick in business, and I believe that sales is what makes businesses run. And so I'm a big fan of it. However, right, we know that your average person's view of sales is not positive, right? They think of the worst case scenarios, the pushy, car salesperson, the aluminum siding, door, whatever. And so there's an identity gap there, always has been. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times now what's happening is a lot of the salespeople are buying into that as well. So I think the salespeople now are saying, they don't want to be, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a customer success person. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a sales, relationship manager or whatever it ends up being. And so I think that understanding that, what we do is is a skill that has to be trained and honed and kind of used often, but also something that you should be proud of and something you should be sharing with other people is the way you get better at. You don't get better at athletics by hiding what you do and by calling yourself something else, right? So like you get better at it by surrounding yourself with other people that are passionate about it and, are pushing the envelope and always trying to do new things. And I feel that, sales is that, I was reading something recently about this, and it's true. almost all of us fell into sales, right? It's not a career field. It's not a course of study in most universities. It's something that you get if you do get a degree in something in business management, and you get out there and realize it doesn't mean anything, and you get a job somewhere and they actually put you into a sales role, or you find it some other way. So because of that, I feel that people they don't own it the way they should own it. So they have this self-identity issue with it. And I think that problem is why we don't kind of demand the kind of respect that we should in a lot of cases. And I look at in organizations a lot of times of, while sales reps in bigger companies a lot of times are some of the best paid people because they're moving that needle, right? They're actually making things happen. There's this kind of disconnect, and people talk a lot about sales and marketing alignment or sales and operations alignment and that sort of thing. And like, there's no need, you don't have engineers and operations alignment, right? That they don't do that, right? So we create these kind of false walls between us because we either aren't proud enough of what we do or are willing to take the common narrative of, salespeople are, it's not this profession that should be seen as something, dignified and something that people that are good at what they do actually choose this. It's something that you just kind of fell into.
All right, so
sorry, a bit long-winded there.
No, but a lot of good stuff to chew on there. So isn't part of the issue there with the self-identity is that we're identifying the wrong thing that they actually do. And by this, I mean is when you think about it, what do we really do as salespeople? I mean, what is our primary function in sales? And I think I could ask the question to 1,000 people and get 1,000 different answers perhaps. But to me, I think part of it is that people have the completely wrong idea about what they're doing in sales. And as a consequence, it has an impact on their ability to succeed. And I'll give you an example. I made sort of before I started my own company, well, even afterwards, when I've worked with clients, I've made a specialty of helping convert engineers into salespeople. And, people with high degree of product knowledge and customer insight into salespeople. Now, intellectually, philosophically, whatever you want to say, none of these people were people that really were inclined at all to be in sales. But what I found is the key to helping them understand and to accept it was to say, well, what do you think you do as a salesperson? And when they finally understood that what their job was not to push something, but to serve somebody, right? This is a service profession. And when they understood their job was to serve as opposed to push, suddenly some of these people became tremendous salespeople because they were there to help.
Yeah, I think that's it's a great way of looking at it, and I agree. Like I tell people all the time that you can't sell anybody. Like you don't change people's minds, especially these days. Like people's opinions are fact to them, right? And so
yes.
You are not going to change somebody's mind. There's no sales trick in the book. There's no if you're tricking people, that's not sales, right? That's manipulation. And so I think what sales is what you said. To me, I go back to it's problem solving. Right. And so what you do is you problem solve. You figure out, hey, is my product or service, will this actually solve the problem you have? What is the problem you have? Are we even talking about the same thing? Are we making are our puzzle pieces going to fit together? And that's why I do think engineers turn into be great salespeople once they kind of get over the head trash of the role is that then they're puzzle solvers. That's what they do, right? That's the idea is that, and that's what we need. And that's the best salespeople I meet are people that look at it. And that's how I think of it. Like when I think of, one of the reasons that, I love enterprise selling when I'm doing that is because it is a very complex puzzle, right? There's politics and there's agendas and there's multiple people and there's all kinds of things. And there's all these things that it's not about, is your software the best use for their company, right? That is almost like that's the 17th thing on a 16-point checklist, right? So it's, solving the rest of the puzzle is the interesting part. And that's what makes really good salespeople. That's what they understand is that that's what they're doing. You're problem solving and you're serving. I think it's great. And,
we're perpetrating and perpetuating, actually. We're doing both, actually. Yeah. We're perpetrating and perpetuating this problem. We meaning sales leaders.
Yes.
Because when you look at job descriptions for open positions, right? What are we looking for? We're looking for a hunter. We're looking for a closer. We want an aggressive, character, personality. And, you sort of go down and it's all these sort of quasi machismo, testosterone laden descriptions, as opposed to saying, look, what we really want is we want somebody that's sort of hyper curious, problem solver, analytic. This is what we want. And no, I've never seen a sales job description written that way, except the ones I write.
Right. But they should be. But I think that you're right, because, it's one of the things I talked about when I was coaching customers a lot. I was like, in their CRM, I don't care what CRM to use. I said, if you need to delete this field in all of your opportunities. And if you can't delete it, just hide it, get rid of it. Like estimated close date is the dumbest thing that everyone's ever talked about in their entire life, right? Like there's nobody ever that can estimate a close date. It never works. It's this weird, we've allowed, Wall Street, for a handful of companies big enough to actually report to Wall Street, we've allowed their behavior of how they think a number should be delivered permeate all the way down to the lowest, to the smallest sales organizations. And you say, you know what? You're not a closer. Your job is not to close. Your job is to, because the idea of close is, again, just even the word is the wrong word. Like it's one of the things I said earlier about that people call us to this, but it's actually what I kind of like in software now. I like this idea of customer success, this idea of your job in software as a service is to get people to keep on paying you, right? So they vote with their wallet. And the way you get them to keep on paying you is have them have success using your tool. If they have success using your tool as they define it, right? As you help them define it, but as long as they define themselves as having success, they're never going to leave, right? And that's the job. So the job is not to close them. The job is to actually open them up, right? Is to actually understand them more, to actually understand how do they define success? What is success going to look like, right? Is that something we can help them deliver? And then to deliver that again and again and again, over and over and over again, as we live more and more in the subscription economy, like there is no close. You don't want them to close, right? You want them to be open forever. You want them as a subscriber for life. That's the goal, right? And so I agree. It's I have problems with the kind of very militaristic language we use sometimes in sales and business. I have the problem with these kind of very aggressive terms. It's just not the way human beings want to relate and work with each other, and it's not the way people actually do work with each other.
Well, I think that's the point, right? So where's this disconnect, coming from, and why is it still so obvious, right? And evident in the way that sales leaders, sort of talk about it is it's like, that's not really the way people do business, not really the way people make decisions. People, they close on their own time frame. They're not closing on your time frame unless you're dangling a big discount in front of them. I mean, it's we still have this myth, as you said, the estimated close date. The other thing that I always still get amused by is the probability weighted forecasts. Right. I mean, it's a tool that I thought was on the verge of going away until CRM systems started coming out and reinforcing it. But when you look at them, it's ridiculous, right? So you think, okay, I give an example of this in my latest book is that if you have 4 competitors on a deal, and if we're saying, look, we're measuring our probability based on basically by a distance, right? By how far we've gone into our sales cycle. Right. Well, if they got 4 proposals, all 4 don't have a 75% chance of winning.
Yeah, and the math's even better than that, because who's everyone's biggest competitor? The status quo do nothing, right? So you've got 4 competitors, but the reality is your biggest competitor. So you're all weighted at maybe a 15% chance each. A 40% chance is they do nothing. They keep their current solution, right? And so the idea that you can. So look, I love funnels. I love the math. I'm a nerd about math, and I love that idea at aggregate, at large scale, at large numbers. Those are things that are interesting to me, right? So you have 30,000 web traffic visitors. You get 2% of them to actually opt into your sales form. To estimating lead count or estimating people entering a funnel, I think is interesting, and you can do at scale. Individual decision percentages are ridiculous. Like that's just you have no idea what's happening to that person. Are they really looking for a solution? Again, I go back to enterprise here, but this is like why I love it's how everyone works. You have no idea what the buyer's really thinking, and they are looking at you and your 4 competitors but maybe they literally don't want a solution because they're afraid the software is going to replace them, or your service is going to replace them, or they're going to be looked down upon. It's not going to help them achieve their personal goal of getting a promotion inside the business. Like, that is never information you're going to be able to garner in a sales process. That is never information you're going to be able to weight with a number, right? Of whether they're going to actually close or not.
Right.
So,
I mean, you may be able to get the information, but you're right. I mean, you can't weight that with a number,
sure.
right?
Right.
But most salespeople, won't get to that point. Well, I mean, that's the thing. We're sort of on this track where you're talking about forecasting and closing, but I once asked a room of sales professionals I was presenting to. I said, so in business to business, relatively complex products and services. So I said, well, raise your hand if you've ever actually been in the room when the customer made the decision.
Not very many hands went up, I guarantee that. Right? So.
Basically none, right?
Right.
And it's like, so what's it mean to be a closer in that circumstance?
Right. I think that's it. I think that answers the question of why it still permeates is, I think it's just a changing of the guard. You figure, basically up until really, the 70s and, solution selling and Sandler and all the kind of the techniques started happening, basically you were all running off the IBM playbook, right? I mean, IBM
five call close.
Right. IBM or NCR, basically the 3 or 4 big companies that actually did sales training in the 20s and 30s. And that was the camp du jour for 50 years. Right. And so you had that, some version of that at least was kind of what we're doing. And of course, that was big. You were walking into merchants and closing a deal. You were getting them to write you a check to buy that cash register you put on their counter. Right. And so that transactional thing was actually happening. But then we just kind of used that language, and it became, the language we were using around these other things. And like you said, now in Siebel and then Salesforce and all the CRMs, now they've kind of become just de facto standards of these things we use. Closed one, close. It's I hate the word closed. Like, not, I just closed one, or closed lost. Like, well, it's not a close because you got this thing opened, but also really, some of the psychological stuff that I really like is this idea of that, a no is actually a win in a lot of cases, right? What happens in most sales is we just don't hear anything.
Right.
And so we get hungry thinking, I haven't heard no yet, so it's still a chance. There's still a chance, especially if I'm relying on it, if I've already mentally cashed that commission check, right? And so so I'm like, it can still happen. I have got Bob and I have a great relationship still. He's still taking all my phone calls. Tells me that they're almost close to making a decision, right? Like, you want to hear a no in that scenario, but then people won't tell you that, right? And so
So as a manager though, so the rule of thumb for a manager in that scenario, especially if you're a smaller company, smaller sales team, is, at least the one I use, is that the likelihood of the deal closing is in inverse proportion to how defensive the sales rep gets about the opportunity.
Right. Absolutely.
So the more you ping them and dive deep into the deal and what's really happening, the more defensive they get, then you know that it's never going to happen.
Right. So and that's great. And defensive is a great word there, because it generally is their defensive, because they then know they haven't done they've let other pieces of fruit die on the vine while they're nurturing this one too much, or they weren't doing other prospects and they haven't solidified their position with other opportunities to be able to deal with a no here. And so because of that, they are desperately defending themselves and their behavior to themselves, let alone to you. Right?
Yeah, well, one of the best examples of this I heard was, and I wrote about this in my most recent book, was I was on a train in New York City getting ready to go to Boston. And it's Friday afternoon. I was going up to Boston to visit my daughter who was going to college up there, and some harried young salesperson gets on the train, phone glued to his ear, sits down in the seat right in front of me. It was the last day of the month, so he was kind of agitated, talking to his boss. I could tell he was sort of, being very defensive about why this one particular deal didn't close on the month. And then the perfect words coming out of his mouth. He goes, "Well, the buyers were just liars."
Right, of course. That's always what it is. It's
always somebody else's
fault.
Buyers were just liars. It's like, right. You got to that stage. They were just pulling your leg this whole time. This was just an elaborate prank to have you waste your time.
And their time. Because they've got nothing better than time.
They had nothing better to do with their time.
To string along sales reps. Like, that's literally, there's a competition inside their organization of who can string along the most sales reps in a calendar year.
Let's jerk Johnny's chain. So yeah, I thought that was priceless. I had to write about that because dude, man up, right? Oh, up to it. The fact that you just didn't do your job.
Yeah, I think that, and so I was in the military for a short period of time, and the key lesson I learned there was, was kind of a leadership lesson, which was when a squad member was screwing up, the military review from a non-commissioned officer point of view, at least, and my first sergeant taught me this when I actually had screwed up. So I'd screwed up, and the company commander, the captain, was kind of reading me the riot act about how much of a screw up I was for this thing I'd done wrong. And the first sergeant, who's a non-commissioned officer, who actually is outranked by the captain, corrected him. He's got 30 years of service in, and said, "Look, at the end of the day, if someone under your command is not performing well, that's your responsibility. Like, that's you. Like, that's on you. Like, you haven't set expectations correctly. You haven't coached them correctly. There's something you haven't done." Now, of course, there's always a poor performer that has to be pushed out. But on that case, I guarantee you that sales manager is a bad sales manager. That sales manager won't listen when a sales rep tells him no, right? It says, "Look, this deal is not going to close," right? They've gone quiet on me. Yes, they were very excited, but I haven't been able to do this. Here's the 3 things I've done to try to re-engage the deal. It's not working. I can't do this. I can't do that. And instead of the sales manager, coaching, well, hey, how do we find this out earlier next time? Like, what warning signals could we have seen? Like, what should we? How do we, make sure this doesn't happen again? And let's focus on other things. Instead, they're like, well, let's just keep calling them, right? You should go sit in their lobby, right? Just go sit in their lobby with a purchase order in your hand. Like, gets all this horrible coaching.
Have you ever done that?
I've been told to do that, right? I've been told to do that, but
I did it. I mean, so I worked for one of those big 4 companies you talked about
right.
that did the training and so on, and my first job, our branch managers for our sales office had their big bonus of the year was based on a June sales contest. And so literally anything that wasn't nailed to the floor got shipped out of the office in June. And there was one customer, this branch manager was bound and determined this guy was going to buy an upgrade to his computer system. And I was just the one to go get that order. And yeah, I was sitting in the lobby with my order form. And this guy, the company I worked for, was a company called Burroughs, is at the time their CEO, his managing philosophy was that customers should be kept surly but not rebellious. Seriously, nice. Honest to God, you can look it up online. This was his customer support mantra.
Right. Because
what they thought was that the slightly unhappy customer was the best prospect for an upsell.
Right.
And so there was a guy who was the customer. He was more than surly. He was just plain pissed. And I was brand new. I hadn't sold the system to the guy, but I had inherited the account. This branch manager, he had a big bonus if I could sell this huge upsell on this peripheral device. And just go close that order today. Right. And don't come back unless you get it.
Right. Don't come back until you got a signed purchase order. Yeah. Look, I mean, I think this is, it's always, the sales rep blamed the lying customer. The sales manager is going to blame the bad sales rep. The VP of sales is going to blame the weak middle sales manager. Like it's the pass the buck game, unfortunately, is what happens a lot in these types of organizations, which again is why I like working with smaller companies these days, just because, there's fewer bucks to pass around. There has to be more introspection because you can't hide. It's hard to hide when you're not a sales team of hundreds. And I think that, again, everyone talks about how everything's changed because of the internet. I think that while it's sped a lot of things up and it's a new channel in a lot of ways, I think the one thing it has made a huge difference is that, it has humanized us all to a bit of an extent where there aren't these barriers to get to people anymore there used to be. There aren't these kind of class systems inside customers versus salespeople. So you better kind of understand why your customer is buying or why they're not buying, because they, even 10 years ago, right, the job as a salesperson was you were the arbiter of information. Right. Someone wanted to do something, they'd call up the 5 big vendors. You all go out there, you do your, dog and pony show, and that's how a sales process would start. Well, now they've done all that on themselves, right? And while I don't buy into the whole 70% of the process is done, there's no doubt that if your only purpose is education of your product, then you're not a salesperson. You're a walking brochure, and the internet does a better job of that than you do, because it's open 24 hours a day, right? So your job needs to be what we said before. Your job needs to be: are you a problem solver? Right? Are you a servant to your customers? Right? Are you actually serving them? Are you actually helping them have success? Are you actually helping them make the proper decision, not the one that gets you the June contest, right? But the actual proper decision for their business, because it's just the switching costs now are so low.
Well, but you raised an interesting point, though. I want to go back a couple steps. Is because you would certainly have people disagree with this, because there's this whole school of thought that says that it's so much harder today. It's just hard. It's harder to get hold of people. It's and I'm like, no, it's just hard. It's still hard. Right. It's always been hard.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not any harder. It's not any easier. It's just hard. This is a hard job.
It's a different hard, right?
Yeah, but it's still hard. I mean, I give the example is, when I was out making 30, 40 cold calls a day and knocking on doors and going into, park at a business park and spend all day calling on every company in the business park is at least if you leave somebody a voicemail today, that, they have a choice. They may or may not listen to it. But you'd go into an office and the gatekeeper, she wouldn't even bother to leave the message, right? You would say, here's my card. If you could give John the message that I stopped by, following up the email, or following up with the mail. Actually, in my case, the mail I sent. It gets torn up as soon as you walk out the door.
Yeah, so I think it's still hard. I agree with that. I think that, again, it depends on how you see it. I think the thing I like about it is if you look at your job as a problem solver, then the more data you have, the better to solve a problem. We have more data now than ever before. Like, right. I can tell you things about my prospects that they don't know I know about them, right? Just sure. Because, the internet has given me all of that power. And so now I have more answers for my puzzle, right? So now I believe this actually makes that easier. Now, yes, it adds new complexity because it's easier to find this information now. Your competitors, it's easier for them as well, right? So it's easier for, email, for example. Like, it's easy to find anyone's email address, so everyone can do it. And so people are being deluged by emails, right? So they're getting way too many emails. Well, okay, then knowing that, then how do you make your email stand out to them? Or how do you, God forbid, pick up the phone now? Because people aren't cold calling anymore, right? Because they're hiding behind social selling. They're hiding behind cold email. They're hiding behind everything that, hiding behind a screen. So, doing the quintessential, zig when everyone else is zagging, right? So pick up that phone, because people actually do answer their phones now more is the other thing, right? So, again.
They don't have people answering their phones for
them.
There's
no such thing as secretaries anymore like that, right? So that they don't exist. Even corporate voicemail doesn't really exist the way it used to either, right? Like, that was the gatekeeper people use. Now people give you their mobile phone numbers. All right. I mean, so like you're going to connect more than you used to, and you're doing something that's hard. And because it's hard, it means fewer people are doing it, which means you have fewer competition doing it. Again, it's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And if it was easy, you wouldn't have the chance to make, a very good salary in a profession. Right. So if it was easy, there'd be no competition to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that it's not that if it's easy, everyone would do it. I think everyone does it, but there's a reason that we have this Pareto distribution of revenue production, that, the 80-20 rule is that, the people have the persistence and the resilience to take the no, to keep on going, to be the problem solver, to be in service to somebody else, which is, psychologically, that's not easy to say, look, I'm here to push something to you, as opposed to say, no, I'm really here to serve you. What do you need, right? How can I help? That's hard for some people.
I agree. I tell you, it's interesting though. I feel like I think to kind of take that kind of back foot, to be a little subservient about it, is a little difficult. But I think it kind of gives you some armor though, right? So if you actually own that, if you believe your job as a problem solver is to serve your customers, then it kind of gives you the power to brush off the rejection. It gives you the power to fight through the no's, or fight through the no responses till you get something. Because if you believe you're in service to somebody, you believe what you're doing probably has value to them, right? So if it has value to them, then you're going to be a little more pushy about it. And I don't mean to be bad pushy, but I mean, the reality is like, it's not, oh, I sent them an email, they didn't respond, they don't love me, right? It's like, hey, I haven't got through to them yet. But what's important is I'm pretty confident that I can help them. I can help them solve the problem they have, right? So now I'm going to try a little harder to make sure my message gets to them. I'm going to try more than just one attempt on a phone call, or more than just one email, or more than one whatever contact form you want to try is. And so I think there's some power in understanding that your role is to serve those people.
Well,
because, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the reasons we sort of short circuit that, and I say we and sort of global, we sales leaders and so on, is we don't train salespeople in a way that instills the passion in them, right? So what you're talking about is what you were just talking about, is the passion, is the firm belief, right? If we're going to serve somebody, we're going to be passionate in the belief that what we are going to serve them with has value for them.
Right.
And that they would be crazy not to want to at least take a look at it, right? Because it's there. And oftentimes people think, well, yeah, that's really plays into the stereotype of the really pushy salesperson, because, they just won't let go because, they just think, wow, this has so much value. Well, but look at it from the other perspective. If you get people that really firmly believe that, they're not really, they might be persistent, but they're going to be persist with value. They're going to offer something the customer really needs. And I'd love to have people like that who felt confident that what they were selling really helped the customer.
Right. I think that's, and you said the V word, which is my favorite word, which is value. And I think that's the big thing people get mistaken here, is that, so if you believe your product or service delivers value to someone, the problem is that me calling you up 100 times and just bragging about how awesome my product or service is because it's going to solve your problem is not actually delivering any value to you. Right.
No, not at all.
So what I don't care how much I believe I'm going to offer value. I need to give you, my line is, if you want to create kind of a valuable offer for someone, you have to offer something of value in their eyes, right?
Exactly.
And you don't get to determine value. They do. Right.
Absolutely.
So you need to figure out, how do I offer this to them in a way that they perceive value from our interaction? How do I get people to willingly enter into a sales conversation with me because I've delivered enough value first? Right. Yeah. And that's the question. It's not just, hey, I'm going to literally call you every day. I remember like people would do that. I'd have people,
sure,
they can go to, here's your phone book, go, call them and like basically threaten them. Right. I'm going to call you every Thursday at 8:15 until you finally return my phone call. Right. And like literally like passively aggressively threaten, prospects.
There's no passive aggressive there. That's just aggressive.
Active aggressive. Sure.
Active aggressive. Right.
So, I think that's not valuable. Right.
No.
But instead saying, right, well, here's something of value to you.
Exactly. And you brought up, and the equation is really, customers have a choice. They invest their time in you. They give you some time. They have an expectation. There's an exchange going to take place. They're going to get value in return. And if there's no value coming in return, you don't get time. And so
it's a sale like that. Someone's time and attention is a sale. Like
it's the first sale. It's the first. It is the first sale. That's what I tell people, is the first sale you make. There's no money changing hands. There's time and value that changes hand. If you can make that first sale, it opens the door to the second sale, which is the next call. So,
and if you're in B2B, that's actually the more valuable of the two sales, because if you're in B2B, for the most part, unless you're selling to the owner of the business, it is not their checkbook they're writing with. Right. And so their time and attention is more valuable to them than the budget they're responsible for.
Right.
Right. So getting them to say yes to that is the hardest sale. That is the more difficult one in B2B. And if you can do that, you got it. You're going to do very well.
Excellent. Well, Damon, hey, unfortunately, we've run out of time. It seems like we could go on forever, but yeah, great conversation. So tell folks how they can find out more about LeadFuze. We were going to talk about LeadFuze, but we had a good conversation otherwise. So tell people how they can learn more about LeadFuze and connect with you.
Yeah, sure. So just go to the website. It's leadfuze.com. That's LEADFUZE. It's an automated email generation, automated cold email generation platform. Help people kind of start new sales conversations. I'm an email guy, so you can always email me if you want. It's Damian@leadfuze.com. Happy to answer any questions or help anybody understand this. And obviously, through our conversation you've seen, I'm always happy to talk sales. So love talking to customers and to business owners and salespeople about what's working, what's not working for them, whether they're a customer of ours or not.
Excellent. Great. Well, Damian, hey, it's been a pleasure. And friends, thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, come back, join me for the next great episode of Accelerate. In the meantime, get a chance, go to iTunes, wherever you listen to this podcast, subscribe, leave us a review. Really appreciate your feedback on what we can do to make this an even more valuable experience for you. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.